Sir Christopher Lee is a famous actor for his roles such as Count Dooku in the Star Wars saga and others. However, before starting his acting career, Lee was in the Finnish Army and served in the British Royal Air Force as an intelligence liaison officer attached to the number 260 Squadron RAF during World War II as a liaison officer for the Special Operations Executive and occasionally the Long Range Desert Group. When the Second World War first broke out in 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland in the Winter War. Christopher Lee volunteered to fight in the Finnish Army in 1939 at age 18, where he and other British volunteers were issued winter gear and placed behind the lines in guard duty details. He knew how to shoot, but later stated that he did not know how to ski, which was a major part of the Finnish military strategy against the Soviets. He never saw combat in Finland and said that if he had, he probably would have died partially due to his inability to ski. Following the end of the Winter War, Christopher Lee was sent back to Britain where he joined the British Army Home Guard in 1940. His father had been a lieutenant colonel in the 60th King's Royal Rifle Corps, serving in the Second Boer War and First World War. However, in the winter of 1940, his father fell ill with bilateral pneumonia and died on March 12, 1941. Realizing that he no longer had an inclination to follow in his father's footsteps in the Army, Lee decided to join up in volunteering for the Royal Air Force. Christopher Lee joined the RAF in 1941 after passing the exams in Britain, and he was sent to South Rhodesia to begin pilot training. However, he suffered from headaches and blurred vision. The medical officer hesitantly diagnosed a failure of his optic nerve, and he was told that he would never be allowed to fly again. But after moving around to several different bases for a little while, Lee decided to become the main character of the RAF in World War II and applied to join the RAF intelligence. He was then attached to number 205 Group RAF before being commissioned at the end of January 1943 and attached to number 260 Squadron RAF as an intelligence officer. As RAF intelligence in World War II was a very demanding job, Lee was broadly expected to know roughly everything about everything. As the North Africa campaign had progressed, the squadron leapfrogged between Egyptian airstrips, lending air support to ground forces and bombed strategic targets. During the Allied advances in Libya, he ran an average of 5 intelligence missions per day. As the Allied advances continued into Tunisia with the Axis forces digging themselves in at the Mareth line, Lee was almost killed when the squadron's airfield was bombed by the Axis. During his time in North Africa as an RAF liaison intelligence officer, he would occasionally be attached to the Long Range Desert Group and Special Operation Executive. After the Axis surrender in Tunisia in May 1943, Lee's squadron moved back to Libya to prepare for Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. He then moved to Malta, and after its capture, the squadron was deployed into Sicily. At the end of July of 1943, Lee received his second promotion of the year to flying officer for exceptional work as an intelligence liaison. After the Sicily campaign ended, Lee came down with malaria for the 6th time in under a year and was flown to a hospital in Carthage for treatment. The guy was just built different for being able to do his work very well in North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Sicily, while also having malaria 6 times in a year. When he returned, the squadron was restless, frustrated, and upset about a lack of news about the Eastern Front and the Soviet Union in general, and with no mail from home or alcohol in the base. This level of unrest had spread and threatened to turn into a mutiny, but Lee, by now an expert on Russia because he was expected to know everything about everything, talked the squadron into resuming their duties, which much impressed his commanding officer. After the Allied invasion of Italy, the squadron was based in Foggia and Termoli during the winter of 1943, where Lee was then liaisoned over to the Army during an officer swap scheme. During the Battle of Monte Cassino, Lee was attached to the Gurkhas of the 8th Indian Infantry Division. And if you don't know who the Gurkhas were, they were basically the action heroes of whatever war they found themselves a part of. While spending some time on leave in Naples, Lee climbed Mount Vesuvius, which erupted 3 days later. I'm just going to say that again. The volcano that destroyed Pompeii erupted 3 days after Christopher Lee decided to climb it. How awesome. During the final assault on Monte Cassino, Lee's squadron was based in San Angelo, and Lee was nearly killed again where one of the planes crashed on takeoff and he tripped over one of its live bombs. After the battle, the squadron moved airfields to just outside of Rome, and Lee visited the city where he met his mother's cousin, who fought in the Italian resistance movement against the fascists. In November of 1944, Lee was promoted again to flight lieutenant and took up a posting at Air Force HQ, where he took part in forward planning and liaison work in preparation for a potential assault into the rumored German Alpine fortress. After World War II ended, Lee was invited to go hunting near Vienna, and I'm not talking about hunting for animals, it was for hunting Nazi war criminals. Because Lee spoke fluent French, Italian, German, and other languages, he was sent to the Central Registry of War Criminals and Security Suspects. For the final months of his service, he was tasked with helping track down Nazi war criminals, where he was given dossiers of what they had done and told to find them, interrogate them as much as he could, and then hand them over to the proper authority. I'm going to let you interpret that as you will. He completed his service with the RAF in 1946 with the rank of Flight Lieutenant. Did you know about Christopher Lee's World War II service before this video? Are there any other aspects of Lee's time in World War II that I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you for watching.